My name is Jade Lawson, 31 years old. I design clothes for people who want to be remembered, not just worn, but remembered. My studio sits at the edge of the old garment district, 3 floors above a noodle shop that smells like late nights and ambition. It's cluttered, loud, alive. That's home to me. The text came just as I was finishing a silk hem under the flickering light of my work lamp. Dylan, you dress like a teenage art teacher on laundry day. I can't take you anywhere like that. I stared at the screen for a long second. The first feeling wasn't anger, it was disbelief. Then came a small, humorless laugh. We'd been together 8 months. Dylan worked in marketing for a luxury car brand, always manicured, always networking. The kind of man who looked at his reflection in passing windows. He liked to say I had potential the way someone talks about a fixer-upper house. I wiped my hands on my apron and reread his message. If you can't dress appropriately, maybe just skip the company gala. A bead of sweat rolled down my neck. I wasn't sure which part stung more, his embarrassment or how casually he said it. In the corner, my cat, named Stitch, because of course, was curled atop a pile of unused tulle. She blinked at me like even she knew this was ridiculous. I texted back, "Got it, I'll figure something out." He replied with a thumbs up emoji, nothing more. The thing Dylan didn't know, what no one in his world seemed to, was that I am my own label. I don't just dabble in fashion. I built EM Studio from scratch. The pieces I make end up on runways, music videos, and magazine covers, though never with my face attached. I let the art speak, not the ego. But when you're surrounded by dyes, thread, and scissors, you learn not to wear white linen or designer heels. You wear what survives. For me, that meant faded jeans, tank tops with chalk smudges, hair tied up with measuring tape. It was my uniform of creation, not neglect. Still, his words echoed. You dress like a teenage art teacher on laundry day. Funny. My laundry day hands had stitched gowns that sold for more than his quarterly bonus. I set down my scissors and stared at the roll of midnight blue silk resting on my table. Imported from Lyon. Cost me 3 months of savings when I first opened shop. I'd been saving it for something special. Something that meant something. Maybe this was it. 2 nights later, Dylan invited me to dinner. Business casual, he said, which I've learned translates to look like me, not you. The restaurant was one of those dimly lit, wine-by-the-glass places where everyone pretends to enjoy microgreens. Dylan was already there, seated with a group of coworkers. He waved me over with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, babe," he said, standing just long enough to show courtesy. "Everyone, this is Jade." One of his colleagues, a woman named Sophie, looked me up and down. "Oh, you're the creative type, right? Dylan said you make costumes." "Designs," I corrected softly. She smirked. "Right, for like theater." Before I could respond, Dylan jumped in. "She's trying to get her business off the ground. You know how passion projects are." I felt my jaw tighten. Trying. My last client had been on the cover of Elle France, but I smiled anyway. "You must be excited for the gala," Sophie continued. "Dylan says it's black tie. Will you be renting something nice?" "I think I'll manage." Dylan coughed. "We're still figuring out what she's going to wear." I nodded, slow and polite. Inside, something in me shifted. The kind of shift you feel right before fabric tears quiet, inevitable, final. Back home, I stood in front of my workshop mirror. My reflection was raw hair, undone skin, glistening with effort, jeans stiff with dried paint. This was me. This was the woman who built beauty with her own hands. But to him, I was an eyesore, a liability in public. He wanted perfection for one night. I could give him that. I ran my fingers along the silk again. Midnight blue with a silver shimmer under light. It felt like the night sky holding its breath. I knew exactly what I would make a gown that could silence a room. While the city outside hummed, I cut the first pattern. Each slice of fabric was a small rebellion, each stitch a whisper. "You don't get to define me." A week passed. Dylan kept texting reminders. "Remember, it's formal. Maybe go simple. Don't overdo it. I'll send you links for inspiration." He sent me pictures of mass-produced dresses, the kind you find in glossy mall windows. Each one screamed safe. Each one screamed, not me. I didn't reply. I stayed in my studio until dawn, sewing in silence, while jazz played softly through an old speaker. I added something special to the gown's inner lining. A quote my mother used to say when people doubted her. "Let them talk, they'll clap later." By the time I finished, the sun was rising over the city. The gown shimmered like spilled starlight. Stitch yawned from her perch, unimpressed by human triumphs. I laughed quietly. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of biting my tongue, of letting him mock what he didn't understand. The gala was tomorrow night. Dylan called me before bed. Just promise you'll keep it classy, okay? It's a big night for me. I said softly, don't worry, I'll make it unforgettable. He chuckled, not catching the undertone. That's my girl. When the call ended, I stared out the window at the flickering neon from the noodle shop below. In the glass reflection, I saw my own face lit by the glow of my creation. Calm, unshaken, he thought I'd embarrass him. He had no idea I'd been preparing to expose him without saying a single cruel word. The night air smelled of soy sauce and rain. Somewhere inside, something healed. The days leading up to the gala felt like waiting for a storm. Not the loud kind with thunder and rain, but the quiet kind that makes the air thick, the kind that makes you listen for what's coming. Dylan had grown smug. The more he criticized my wardrobe, the more confident he became in his self-appointed role as my style coach. He'd show up at my apartment unannounced, holding shopping bags. Babe, he'd say with a forced grin, I saw this on sale. Maybe try it for the gala. He pulled out a pale pink dress made of synthetic satin that clung to every fingerprint. It looked like something a bridesmaid would wear in 2007. I smiled faintly. It's very pink. He grinned, missing the point. Right feminine. Classic. I mean, you could use a little polish. There it was. That word again. Polish. He said it like I was a scuffed shoe, something that needed buffing before it could be seen in daylight. When he left, I hung the pink dress in my studio right beside the midnight blue gown I was secretly working on. The contrast made me smirk. One screamed safe. The other whispered, don't blink. The following weekend, his best friend Sophie invited us to brunch. She worked with Dylan and clearly enjoyed her role as the unofficial spokesperson of his image. As soon as I sat down, she leaned across the table and smiled too sweetly. So Jade, did you find something decent to wear yet? Decent, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. She giggled, sipping her mimosa. You know what I mean. The company has standards. No offense, but your bohemian vibe might confuse the sponsors. Dylan didn't even flinch. He just nodded, agreeing silently. I cut my pancakes slowly, deliberately. Oh, don't worry. I'll make an impression. Sophie laughed like it was a joke. Just not the wrong kind, right? Dylan gave her a look that said stop, but the damage was done. They didn't know it, but every comment, every side-eyed smirk, every condescending suggestion was sewing another thread into something I was crafting, not fabric, but a moment. At night, I poured that quiet humiliation into my work. Each stitch of the gown became a confession. Each glittering bead an answer I'd never say aloud. The dress evolved like a secret rebellion, long fluid lines of midnight silk that caught light like liquid. I embroidered faint silver constellations across the back, inspired by the night sky over my workshop's skylight. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about truth. If he wanted to see what appropriate looked like, I'd show him the art he kept underestimating. 3 nights before the gala, Dylan dropped by again. This time, he seemed nervous. He glanced at the piles of fabric in my studio. So, did you get something, you? I smiled softly. I did. He squinted, suspicious. Can I see it? Not yet, I said. It's a surprise. He frowned. Jade. This isn't the time for surprises. My boss will be there. Investors. It's important that we look compatible, I finished for him. I was going to say presentable. Don't worry, I said calmly. You'll look fine next to me. He hesitated, clearly unsure if that was reassurance or a threat. That night, as I stitched the final seam, I caught my reflection in the window. My face looked different, not harder, just steadier. I thought about how women like me, artists, builders, dreamers, were often told to shrink, to soften, to make others more comfortable. But the truth was, comfort had never built anything beautiful. So I let the thought burn quietly while I added the finishing touch, a small hidden monogram inside the hem, EM, my label's mark, my signature in thread. The next evening, while Dylan was out networking, I took a moment to test the gown under real light. I dimmed my workshop lamp and let the warm glow from the window spill across the fabric. The silver embroidery shimmered like stars caught mid-breath. I turned slowly, and for the first time in a long while, I saw myself, really saw myself. No frills, no apology, just a woman who built something magnificent from her own pain. The phone buzzed again. Another text from Dylan. Please don't make this about proving a point. It's my night too. I stared at the screen, then set the phone down. Maybe that was the difference between us. For him, it was about appearance. For me, it was about truth. I turned off the light and whispered to the gown, tomorrow they'll all see what you see every day. The silk swayed slightly, as if nodding in agreement. And in that dim room, full of fabric and quiet revenge, I smiled, not the bitter kind, but the calm, certain kind that only comes when you already know how the story ends. The night of the gala arrived like the closing scene of a film I'd already seen in my head 100 times. Rain slicked the streets, turning the city lights into rivers of gold. My taxi stopped in front of the Glassmore Hotel, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers glowing through tall windows. I didn't tell Dylan I'd be arriving separately. He'd texted earlier, still half patronizing. Remember black tie, don't overthink it. I looked at my reflection in the car window before stepping out. The midnight blue gown shimmered like still water, the silver constellations faint until they caught the light. My hair was swept back, simply nothing extravagant, because the dress itself breathed confidence. No need for noise when you are the moment. The doorman blinked, then smiled wide. You look extraordinary, ma'am. Thank you, I said, stepping inside. The ballroom was a galaxy of suits and satin laughter and champagne flutes clinking under chandeliers. Dylan was by the bar, surrounded by his coworkers. His back was turned. I caught him mid-laugh, easy, comfortable, playing the part. Then he turned. The moment his eyes found me, the laughter died in his throat. His glass froze halfway to his mouth. Conversations around us dulled, like the sound had been vacuumed out of the room. I walked toward him, slow, deliberate, every step echoing on the marble. Hi, Dylan. Jade. His voice cracked slightly. You look presentable, I offered gently. His co-workers exchanged looks wide-eyed. One of them, a tall man in a dark suit, finally spoke. That dress is that. Before Dylan could answer, another voice joined in from behind him, older, commanding. Magnificent piece, said Mr. Fitzgerald, Dylan's CEO. That's hand embroidery, isn't it? He stepped closer, inspecting the silver constellations glimmering under the lights. The craftsmanship exquisite. Who's the designer? I smiled politely. That would be me. A silence, then a sharp inhale from Sophie, who had suddenly appeared at Dylan's side. Wait, you made that? Yes. Mr. Fitzgerald's brow lifted. Jade Lawson. I nodded once. That's right. Good God, he said, his whole expression shifting. My wife has 3 of your pieces. We tried for months to get on your custom list. All at once, the temperature in the room changed. Whispers spread, recognition dawning. Sophie looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Dylan's expression was somewhere between pride and terror. Mr. Fitzgerald extended his hand. It's an honor. We're actually discussing a rebrand for our luxury division. I'd love to have your perspective sometime. Of course, I said smoothly. We can schedule something. He turned to Dylan, oblivious to the tension strangling the air. You didn't tell us your girlfriend was that Jade Lawson. You've been keeping secrets, son. Laughter rippled through the group. Dylan tried to recover. I didn't think it was relevant. Not relevant, Mr. Fitzgerald chuckled. You're dating one of the most talented designers in the city. I smiled faintly, watching Dylan's throat tighten. He likes to keep things low profile, I said. The table laughed again, not realizing the knife in that line. The rest of the evening unfolded like a symphony of poetic justice. Everywhere I turned, people asked for business cards, collaboration, inquiries, compliments that Dylan used to downplay as hobby talk. One of his coworkers, Trevor, leaned over at one point and said under his breath, You know, Dylan told us you were trying to start a little online shop. I didn't realize you were the shop. I met his gaze calmly. He tends to underestimate things he doesn't understand. Trevor smirked. Guess he's learning tonight. Later, as the music softened and the champagne dulled the buzz in the room, Dylan pulled me aside. His hand trembled slightly against my arm. What was that? He hissed quietly. What was what? You just humiliated me. I blinked, almost pitying him, by existing. You could have warned me. Would you have believed me if I did? He didn't answer. His jaw worked, struggling between apology and blame. You lied to me, he said finally. You let me think. That I wasn't enough, I finished. No, you decided that. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Mr. Fitzgerald called out across the room, Jade, we're gathering for photos. Come join us. I smiled sweetly. Excuse me. It's my turn to look appropriate. And I walked away, the silver constellations of my gown shimmering under chandelier light, like stars escaping orbit. When the night ended, I stepped outside alone. Rain had stopped. The city smelled of wet pavement and expensive perfume. I stood by the curb, exhaling a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The irony hit me. Then Dylan had spent months embarrassed by how I looked, and tonight he was the one shrinking behind me. I caught my reflection in a hotel window. The gown glowed faintly under the street lamp. A quiet smile tugged at my lips. He wanted someone who made him look good. Instead, I made him invisible. The taxi arrived. I gathered the hem of the dress, stepped inside, and didn't look back. For the first time in months, I woke up smiling. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because everything was clear. The night of the gala had gone viral in Dylan's office. Word spread faster than spilled champagne. Someone had posted a group photo from the event, the shot where Mr. Fitzgerald's hand rested proudly on my shoulder, praising the brilliant designer, Jade Lawson. By morning, the comments section was chaos. Wait, wasn't that the girlfriend he said was unemployed? This is the same Jade from EM Studio. Imagine calling your fashion designer girlfriend a mess because she doesn't wear Zara. I didn't share or comment. I didn't need to. The truth was already working for me. Dylan, however, was unraveling. He called me 6 times before noon. When I finally picked up, his voice was shaky, but defensive, like someone trying to sound calm while the house behind them burns. Jade, we need to get ahead of this, he said. People are talking. About what? About last night. They think I didn't know who you were. You made me look like an idiot. Did I said quietly. Or did you do that yourself? He sighed, the sound of a man used to controlling a narrative. Look, can we at least align on what to say? Like you never mentioned the name of your label, right? So technically, this was a misunderstanding. Dylan. My tone cut clean through his PR panic. You told your colleagues I was a struggling hobbyist. You told them you were embarrassed by me. What part of that was a misunderstanding? Silence. Finally, he said softly, I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? His sigh deepened. You have to admit, Jade, you can come across unconventional. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. That's what creativity looks like, Dylan, not confusion. By afternoon, he'd switched tactics. A new Instagram post appeared on his feed. So proud of my talented girlfriend at Jade Lawson Studio. Couldn't be happier to support her journey. The photo A zoomed in crop from the gala, his arm half visible beside me, like he'd been there all along, beaming with pride. The comments weren't kind. Bro, weren't you embarrassed by her last week supporting her journey after she carried the whole night? He deleted the post within hours. That night, he showed up at my studio. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. He stood there, dark circles under his eyes, holding a bottle of wine like an offering. Jade, can we talk? I folded my arms. Make it quick, I'm working. He looked around, scanning the racks of gowns and sketches pinned across my wall. I didn't realize how successful you were. You always dressed so... He trailed off, searching for a word that wouldn't make him sound worse. So normal, I offered. He nodded weakly. Yeah. I thought you didn't care about appearances. I don't, I said, returning to my sewing table. That's what makes me different from you. He flinched, but pressed on. Look, I messed up, okay? I was insecure. I wanted to impress my boss, and I projected that on you. Projecting, I repeated, almost amused. You didn't project. You belittled, repeatedly. He set the wine down. Can't we start over? I turned to him, leaning against the table, calm but sharp. You had 8 months to start over, Dylan. You just kept pressing repeat. After he left, I sat alone in my workshop, surrounded by the hum of sewing machines and faint jazz. For the first time, I felt the exhaustion not of heartbreak, but of carrying someone else's expectations like extra weight. I thought about the countless women who'd been told to shrink themselves to smile softer, talk quieter, dress better, just to soothe a man's ego. Not anymore. A few days later, I met with Mrs. Fitzgerald, the CEO's wife. She'd called after the gala, her tone bright and curious. Jade, darling, I've been obsessed with that gown since I saw you walk in. My friends can't stop talking about it. How soon can we collaborate? We met at a cafe overlooking the river. She wanted to launch a charity fashion line limited edition proceeds going to women's shelters. I agreed instantly. When she raised her glass, she smiled knowingly. Your story will sell itself. Everyone loves a comeback. I smiled a little sadly. It's not a comeback when you were never the one who fell. Back at my studio, the news of the collaboration spread. Orders poured in. A journalist reached out for an interview. My inbox overflowed with inquiries from people who'd never looked twice at that messy designer in jeans. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very image Dylan had mocked had now become my brand's power. That night, Dylan sent one last text. I'm happy for you. Really. I just wish you hadn't made me look so bad. I stared at it for a while before replying. You looked exactly like who you chose to be. Then I turned off my phone. I sat by the window, the city glowing beyond the glass, and whispered to myself, you don't need someone to believe in you when you already do. The needle on my sewing machine clicked back to life. I went back to work, humming softly, stitching new beginnings from the same old threads. The interview was supposed to be a simple lifestyle feature, a few questions for an online magazine about women in business. but nothing about that week was simple anymore. The journalist, a young woman named Clara, came to my studio with a camera and a list of questions that went far beyond fabric and thread. She'd clearly done her homework. So she began gently. How does it feel to go from being underestimated to becoming one of the most talked about designers in the city? I smiled faintly. Strange. Like everyone suddenly found the volume knob on my life and turned it up. She laughed softly. And your partner Dylan, right? How's he handling all the attention? I paused. The hum of the sewing machine behind us filled the silence for a beat too long. There is no we anymore, I said finally, but I'm handling it fine. Her eyes softened. Would you say what happened motivated you? I looked down at the gown I was hand-beating. No, it revealed me. There's a difference. By the time the article went live, the headline read, "The Woman Who Redefined What Dress to Impress Really Means." The photo accompanying it showed me mid-laughter thread in hand, sunlight pouring through the window behind me. Authentic, unstaged, and beneath it a quote, "When someone tells you you're not enough, they're just showing you what they lack, Jade Lawson." The piece went viral. Clients doubled overnight. And then as if on cue, Dylan reappeared. He invited me to dinner for closure. The message was polite, measured, almost corporate. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Part of me wanted to see if he'd changed. The rest of me wanted to be sure that I had. The restaurant he chose was pretentious gold accents, imported roses, the kind of place that mistakes silence for sophistication. When I arrived, the hostess led me not to a table for two, but a round table with 4 place settings. My stomach sank. Then I saw them Dylan's parents. His mother, Eleanor, wore a string of pearls and the kind of polite smile that never reached her eyes. His father, Charles, was already half a glass into an expensive bottle of wine. Dylan stood awkwardly gesturing for me to sit. Jade, I hope you don't mind. I thought it'd be nice for my parents to meet you. Without asking me, he winced. It's important. I sat anyway out of curiosity more than politeness. Eleanor leaned forward immediately. We've heard so much about you, dear. Dylan tells us you run some kind of fashion startup. Something like that, I said evenly. Charles smiled thinly. And it's doing well financially, I hear. Quite impressive for an independent operation. Their tone wasn't admiration, it was calculation. Every question after that had a price tag attached. How stable is your business? Do you plan to expand or stay small scale? Would you ever consider merging your income, say for a joint investment? Halfway through, the truth settled like a cold stone in my stomach. This wasn't dinner, it was an interview. And the position they were filling wasn't future daughter-in-law. It was financial insurance policy. I set down my fork carefully. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said softly. I design clothes, not lifeboats. Eleanor blinked. Pardon? I turned to Dylan, my voice calm but surgical. You told them, didn't you, that I could help you upgrade your lifestyle? Dylan swallowed hard. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Charles cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Now there's no need to get emotional. I'm not emotional, I interrupted. I'm just realizing this dinner wasn't about meeting your family. It was about evaluating my worth. Eleanor tried to recover with a brittle smile. We just want what's best for our son. Then maybe let him earn it, I said. The table fell silent. Only the faint clink of glasses from nearby diners filled the space between us. I reached for my purse and stood up. Dylan's voice broke. Jade, please don't do this here. I looked down at him, my tone almost kind. This is the last time you'll have to be embarrassed by me, Dylan. You can stop worrying about how I make you look. He didn't move. His mother's lips parted like she wanted to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. As I walked away, the host tried to hand me my coat. I shook my head. Leave it. I like the chill. Outside, the air was cool cleansing. For a moment, I just stood there under the golden light of the restaurant sign, breathing. When I finally got home, I noticed something caught on the back of my dress, a single silver thread pulled loose from the hem. It dangled and swayed as I walked through the door, shimmering faintly under the lamp. I smiled. A loose thread, the last connection to a pattern I'd finally decided to stop fixing. I pulled it free, tied it in a tiny knot around my finger, and whispered, "For every woman who's ever been told to look smaller, may she never learn how." Then I let the thread fall. The silence after that dinner didn't last long. It never does with people like Dylan, the ones who can't stand being painted in anything less than flattering light. A few days later, my phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it was about my latest collection. Then I saw the headlines. Influencer Dylan Ross opens up about emotional manipulation by designer X. He'd gone public. There he was, perfectly lit in a casual interview setup, playing the role of the misunderstood boyfriend. She hid who she really was, he said solemnly. I thought we were building a life together, but she was testing me, making me feel small so she could have the upper hand. I was blindsided. I could almost hear the script in his tone, the victim narrative, the tragic romance turned cautionary tale. He'd always been good at controlling perception. He just forgot that now perception wasn't his to control anymore. The comments split in half. Some called me cold. Others saw straight through him. Funny how he didn't seem manipulated until she became successful. Man's ego couldn't survive her spotlight. Every woman knows a Dylan. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't even flinch. Because silence, real, deliberate silence, can be louder than any defense. 2 days later, my assistant Mia rushed into the studio. You need to see this, she said, handing me her phone. It was a direct message from Mrs. Fitzgerald. I saw Dylan's interview. My husband and I are so sorry you're dealing with that nonsense. By the way, I'd still love you to design something special for our anniversary. The whole city's talking about you for all the right reasons. I laughed softly, the sound a mix of disbelief and relief. When I met Mrs. Fitzgerald for the design consultation, she leaned in conspiratorially over her espresso. You know, I heard Dylan's side first, she admitted. But then I remembered the way he spoke to you at the gala, condescending, dismissive. It was written all over his face. I smiled. I guess perception catches up eventually. She grinned, and karma has great taste and timing. While Dylan's story was fading, mine was growing. The collaboration with the Fitzgerald Foundation went viral, not because of the clothes, but because of the message. Each limited edition gown came with a small silver tag engraved with a quote, "You can't outshine a woman who stopped needing permission to glow." Orders flooded in. Celebrities posted about it. And every time my name appeared in an article, his narrative lost traction. He'd tried to drag me back into the mud, but I was already walking on marble. One evening, around closing time, I heard a knock on the glass door of my studio. When I looked up, I froze. Dylan stood outside, no cameras, no entourage. Just him, drenched from the rain, clutching a crumpled umbrella. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. He stepped in dripping water onto the polished floor. Jade, he began softly, can we talk? I crossed my arms. You already did, on camera. He flinched. That was a mistake. The PR guy said it would help. I felt like I lost control of everything. Because you did, I said evenly. He looked around the studio, the gowns, the sketches, the framed article on the wall. You're everywhere now. Everyone's talking about you. That's the thing about truth, I said. It's louder than lies, but it takes patience. He took a slow breath. I never meant to hurt you. I tilted my head. But you did, over and over. Not because you didn't know better, but because you did and you didn't care. His eyes glistened. I loved you before all this. No, I said softly. You loved the version of me that didn't challenge you. The one who dressed down, smiled quietly, and made you feel taller. He stepped closer, voice breaking. Can't we try again? I shook my head. You want forgiveness so you can feel good about yourself. That's not the same as being sorry. For a moment, his shoulders sagged. Then something desperate flashed in his eyes, a familiar, ugly defensiveness. He pulled out his phone and started recording. Say it, he said quietly. Say you're done with me, that you never loved me. I almost laughed. You still think this is a show, don't you? Jade, please. I took a step forward, my voice calm, steady. You want content, fine. Here's your clip. I looked straight into his camera. Love isn't supposed to humiliate you. It's supposed to see you. You didn't lose me, Dylan. You let me outgrow you. He lowered the phone, slowly, speechless. Then I opened the studio door. Good night, Dylan. He stood there for a long time, soaked his reflection, fractured by the glass, as I locked the door behind him. Later that night, Mia texted me a screenshot. Someone had leaked part of Dylan's video online, the part where I spoke. It spread like wildfire. Within hours, the clip had millions of views under the tag, #OutgrowYou. Women everywhere were stitching the sound, sharing their own stories of walking away from belittling relationships. For the first time, my voice, not just my designs, had become part of something bigger. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and smiled to myself. He'd come to destroy my peace. Instead, he'd amplified my purpose. 3 months passed. Enough time for the noise to fade, for the headlines to be replaced by newer scandals, newer stories, newer heartbreaks. But mine had settled into something quieter, something steady. The storm had cleared, and what remained was clarity. My studio had changed. The walls that once felt too empty now buzzed with energy assistants cutting patterns, clients dropping by with flowers, music floating through the air. There were laughter and late nights again, but this time they weren't fueled by survival. They were fueled by purpose. On one wall hung a framed printout of that viral quote that started it all. "You didn't lose me. You let me outgrow you." Every day, women would message the studio page with stories about the jobs they left, the marriages they ended, the dreams they'd started chasing again. Some wrote that they'd bought one of my dresses just to feel visible for the first time in years. And maybe that was what all this had been about, not revenge, not redemption, but visibility. One morning, Mia burst into the studio with a grin. "Guess who's on the front page of Elle?" She laid the magazine on my table. There it was, Jade Lawson, the woman who sewed power back into femininity. I laughed. "They make it sound like I stitched a revolution." "Maybe you did," she said, handing me my coffee. A week later, I was invited to a charity gala, this time as the honored designer. Same venue, same chandeliers, different world. As I walked through the marble foyer, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored wall. No glittering gown tonight, just a sleek black jumpsuit, silver earrings, hair pulled back. Confident. Effortless. People greeted me by name. Cameras flashed. I smiled politely, but my focus stayed grounded. This wasn't about the spotlight. It was about the light I'd built for myself. Halfway through the evening, a familiar voice reached my ears. Dylan. He was across the room, thinner, somehow, quieter. The crowd didn't orbit him anymore. For a moment our eyes met. He froze. Then he smiled, small, cautious, apologetic. I gave him a polite nod, nothing more. That single gesture carried everything words couldn't. "I'm done fighting you. You're not my story anymore." He looked away first. Later that night, when the applause faded and the stage lights dimmed, I stepped outside for air. The city glowed beneath me, 1,000 windows flickering like stars. I thought about the woman I'd been before all this, the one who tried to dress smaller so love would feel easier, the one who laughed off insults to keep the peace, the one who mistook silence for safety. She was gone, and in her place stood someone who finally understood that softness and strength were not opposites. They were threads of the same fabric. The next morning, I boxed up the midnight blue gown, the one that had started everything. I slipped a handwritten note inside. "To the woman who wears this next, may you never confuse humility with hiding." Then I donated it to a charity auction for women rebuilding their lives. When the gown left my hands, I didn't feel loss. I felt light. Because I'd learned that letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing up space to become. That evening, I walked home through the city streets in paint-stained jeans and an old linen shirt, hair tied up with measuring tape the way I always used to. A teenager passing by glanced at me, then did a double take. "Wait, are you Jade Lawson?" I smiled. Sometimes. She beamed. "I love your work. You make me want to design." "Then you should." I said, "Don't wait for anyone to tell you when." She nodded shyly and walked off, and for a moment I just stood there watching her disappear into the crowd, like a glimpse of my younger self walking free for the first time. Back at the studio, the city lights flickered through the windows as I turned on the sewing machine. The needle clicked in rhythm, steady and sure. And as the thread caught the light, I whispered softly, "When someone's ashamed of you at your simplest, they don't deserve you at your masterpiece." A pause. Then with a smile, "Style fades, character doesn't." The machine hummed on, stitching another chapter